The following program was paid for by the friends and partners of WLMB-TV 40 Toledo.
You can get healing, you can receive deliverance, you can get hope and help for the things that you're going through in your life. So I think the thing that I want people to walk away with more than anything is just knowing that God is the answer for what they are going through in their life.
Well, I want to welcome you to another episode of Main Street, the fastest half hour on television. I'm Dr. Jamey Schmitz. Of course, I'm joined by my friend and colleague and co-host for the last 21 years, Rebecca Vassar.
Well, Jamey, we have a show that is going to inspire and encourage and challenge folks out there, as we are going to be talking about freedom from anorexia. Our guest today is Rebecca Vassar. She goes by Becky V over at Proclaim FM. She's a station manager, and I heard you sharing your story of overcoming anorexia as a teenager, and I just was like, that is so powerful. We've got to get Becky on Main Street and hear this story, and so I'm excited that you are here, and maybe you could tell us, what do you hope people will gain from today's message?
Absolutely. Probably the main thing that I would really love for people to walk away with is the fact that God has the ability, no matter what we're going through in our life, to reach in and change our lives. That's right. He has the ability to reach in and you can get healing, right. You can receive deliverance, you can get hope and help for the things that you're going through in your life. So I think the thing that I want people to walk away with more than anything is just knowing that God is the answer for what they are going through in their life.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about a couple words today,
sure.
Anorexia,
absolutely.
And the word bulimia, yeah. And anorexia nervosa,
right.
And for a lot of people those are terms in the culture, they're kind of familiar with them, but could you please explain what anorexia is and how that is different from the eating disorder of bulimia?
Absolutely. One of the things that I learned and was surprised to learn was that a man named William Gohl in 1874 had been doing research to let people know there's this illness out there, and I think at first he called it hysteria, and then he decided that it was something that actually needed to have a little bit more research done in it. He knew it was something that was psychological and emotional. He eventually penned the term anorexia nervosa. And I was so surprised because it was something that was all the way back in 1874. When I was going through it, it was in the 1980s, and it seemed to be that there was a lot of girls going through this at the time. I know that boys are affected as well, but there's really such a smaller percentage of boys that are affected by it, about a tenth of what girls go through in trying to lose weight and all of that. And what anorexia is really, it's a nervous loss of appetite. But the interesting thing is that it's not really necessarily a loss of appetite as much as it is a choice not to eat. And so this anorexia nervosa is really signified by starvation more than anything. It's a starvation diet that is continual. You asked me about the difference between anorexia and bulimia.
Yes.
And bulimia is actually where a person might starve themselves, but they'll go on binges. So they'll starve themselves, but then they'll be so hungry and they'll binge and they'll eat a mass amount of food, and then they'll purge. And then that'll start the cycle all over again. So between anorexia and bulimia, they're both very, very similar. And what ties them together more than anything is that they're both emotional and psychological illnesses.
Now, okay, so you dealt with this as a teenager.
Absolutely.
So take us back to that time you dealt
Absolutely.
with anorexia, right?
Yeah, I was about 16. I had gone through my sophomore year in high school, and almost towards the end of my sophomore year, there was this girl that was I was a wrestling cheerleader. They called them mat maids growing up.
Oh, I remember that. My sister was one.
I was a mat maid. And she was a part of the mat maids, and she was so thin. Now, I was too. You've got to realize I was about 5'1.5". I think I'm getting shorter now, but I was about 5'1.5", and I weighed about 100 pounds, as it was, or 110. And That year, she joined the Mat Maids, and she was extremely thin, real petite little girl, very much more petite than I was. And people started talking about, oh, you wear a size 0, and they just, were talking about her all the time and how thin she was. And I just started thinking, wait a second, I want to be the thinnest, and it's just something just started brewing in me. And my mom also at the time was very thin, 5'3", and she weighed about 110 pounds, but she was talking about she had a belly, a stomach, us girls, once we have babies, that's what we talk about. So I kept thinking she's so thin, but I started thinking, if she needs to lose weight, I probably need to be really watching my weight. And I just kind of latched onto it. Now that's the process really that I kind of went through as a 16-year-old.
Yeah, so that was kind of how you viewed yourself.
I viewed myself as that I needed to lose some weight.
Yeah. What were the strongest symbols that you said, something's not right here with my body?
Well,
this is not just a casual diet.
Right. Pretty much what happened was I started starving myself right away. I would take laxatives. I mean, this is a person that I didn't eat very much, but then I was taking like 16 laxatives a week, which is a crazy amount.
Wow.
It causes a huge electrolyte imbalance in your body. These things are very dangerous, and it's really a testimony to God that I am alive and I made it through this process, because I really could have harmed myself. I would take diuretics, which also deplete your body of any, water. Then I was also taking diet pills, which were way too strong for my body. I was starving myself, and then as you're starving yourself, I'm taking a diet pill, and that diet pill is going into my stomach, and there is nothing for it to contend with. There's no food down there, there's nothing, and so it started eating the lining of my stomach. I would jog in place 1,000 steps at night. There was so many different things that I would do.
Well, did your family notice that?
Yeah.
My family, absolutely. My sisters first. I have 4 sisters, so there's 5 girls. My sisters all noticed first, and a couple of them. A couple of them were already away from home, and the couple that were there were kind of like, you're kind of getting thin. My mom didn't really notice right away. She was starting her own business, so she was really involved in that. But then the principal of the high school called her one day, and he was a good friend of our family's anyway, and he called me into his office, and he tried to talk some sense into me, and then he called her and talked to her. And at that point, she took me to see a psychologist in the area. But really, before that happened, I would talk to the guidance counselor at school all the time.
Kind of the cat was out of the bag now.
It was. I hid my diuretics and my diet pills and all those things, in my purse and things like that. But yeah, eventually when that took place, the cat was out of the bag. So my mom took me to a psychologist. I went a couple of times, and I just really didn't feel like that, they were very relevant to me. The things
or
that they were
really
saying.
wasn't that big of a problem.
I'm right. Absolutely. I'm a teenager. And I knew what I was trying to do. And at that point, I wasn't ready to be done. I did get to a place where I eventually lost weight and got way down to the 70s.
Wow.
Oh, my.
And I was very, very skeletal. And my hair became very thin and kept
brittle.
breaking off. And I got a little fine growth of hair on my skin. It's called lanugo. It's like what a baby is born with. They're born with little fine hairs on their face.
And that's the body's way of
protecting itself. Yeah, it's trying to keep warmth and maintain warmth on the body. And your body does what God created it to do. It does things to protect itself. And so that's pretty much what took place. And I just really did not realize that I was in as deep of a pit as I became.
Did somebody confront you?
Well, here's what happened one day. I was at school and I took 2 diet pills. I decided I'm going to take 2. Now, I haven't eaten for probably maybe a full day. And I took 2 diet pills on an empty stomach. And I remember that as I swallowed them, my body almost wanted to reject them as it was anyway. And I went ahead and got them down, and I went and I was in my 3rd period class, and it was a math class. And I was sitting there, and I remember that all of a sudden I had the worst pain in my chest I've ever had. And I thought, I'm having a heart attack. And I couldn't breathe, and the room just started to swim in front of me, and I almost passed out. And the teachers knew something was wrong. And he said, Becky, you know, he came over to me. He's like, I think you need to go down to the nurse's office. I said, yeah, I need to go to the nurse's office. So I went down to the nurse's office. And that was right across the hall, well, right across the area from the guidance counselor's office. Now, I've been talking to him for a good year and a half, sitting in his office probably at least 3, maybe 4 times a week for about an hour.
That's a lot.
Yeah, yeah, because
did he have a clue about the
He did.
disorder?
He totally knew, and so many of the teachers knew. They knew my family. They were very concerned about me.
But now this is the 9-alarm fire.
This is it, and I'm so sick. And I get down there and I tell them what I did, and they said, you know, we've got to help you. We've got to get something in you. You've got to get some kind of sugar. So they gave me a candy bar and they gave me a orange juice. And I, for the life of me, could not make myself drink the orange juice or eat the candy bar. But they came and told me, they said, Becky, if you can't eat that candy bar, your body is going to kill itself. You have to eat this candy bar. You have to drink this orange juice. We're going to have to call your parents. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. So I went and I sat in front of the toilet and I ate the candy bar and I drank the orange juice. I didn't eat all of it and I didn't drink all of it, but I did what I could, and enough to their satisfaction. And they let me stay in the nurse's office for the rest of the day until I started to feel a little bit normal. And then I walked home. On my way home, I became very depressed. A diet pill is kind of like a little high that you have, and then when you crash, it's very low. And as I was walking home, I remember thinking, I just want to walk out into the street in front of a car. And we lived on a very busy street in Perrysburg, and I just kept thinking, and I actually started walking towards the edge of the street to just walk in front of a car. And all of a sudden, somebody kind of honked their horn and slowed down and pulled up, and it was the school nurse, and she said, Becky, let me take you home. And I think that was yet another time when God stepped in and saved me. And I got into that car, and she took me home.
Well, I think that is the beginning of the healing process,
Absolutely.
and we're going to hear more about that when we come back.
One of the things that I definitely strongly believe in is the power of prayer. And I do believe that you can be prayed over and that you can say, God, you have to take this from me. You know, you have to help me because I am addicted to this, or I'm dealing with this, or I'm struggling with this eating disorder, and I don't want it to kill me.
The mission of Dominion Broadcasting WLMB-TV 40 is to provide Christ-centered television of high technical quality and programming excellence to uplift, unite, educate, challenge, and encourage viewers in a manner consistent with the teachings of God's Word. Won't you join us? Please send your gift today and be a part of the ongoing mission of WLMB-TV 40. Thank you.
WLMB's free monthly program guide keeps you informed about your favorite Christ-centered and family-friendly programming found on WLMB. There's something for the whole family to enjoy, from great Bible teachers to classic family favorites. Plus, you'll find family movies, news from a Christian perspective, local shows Main Street and Pastor's Point, excellent don't-miss documentaries, and much more. Enjoy quality Christian television on WLMB-TV 40 and sign up for your free monthly program guide today.
Now, back to Main Street.
Well, welcome back to Main Street. We are talking with Becky Vassar. We're talking about overcoming anorexia. And Becky, we just left off. You just gotten picked up by the nurse, and so please continue your story.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was walking home, and she stopped by and picked me up. And I think, like I said, that was a divine appointment. I think that was yet another time when God said, I'm not gonna do this. I'm not gonna let you do this to yourself, because I was wanting to walk out there in front of a car. And so she dropped me off at the house, and I went in, and I fought. I had a real mental battle that night. I really fought. I was hearing, when I would lay down, I was so thin, and I just couldn't focus, and I would lay down, and I would hear just all these voices and just things in my head, and I was right then at that point in my life going, God, I know that something is wrong, and I need your help. I need your help. So that was kind of my first beginning of, hey, God, I need your help. And my sister was going to church just had been going to church for a year or so, and she would always ask me to go to church with her all the time. And I'd always say, no, I don't want to go. And she was going to church out in Sylvania, and so she invited me again. And she finally told me, she said, Becky, stop saying no, because you know I'm eventually going to make you go. So you might as well just give in right now and go with me. And I said, okay, I'll go. So I went to church with her, and I had gotten saved when I was 4 years old. My family was Baptist when we were growing up, and my parents took us to church, and they stopped about the time I was 7. But when I was 4, I crawled under a table, and I still remember it to this day. I laid there, and I prayed, God, forgive me, please forgive me, over and over again. And my mom finally bent down under the table, and she said, now you know, you only have to ask one time. and that always stuck with me. I've always remembered that, and I was 4 years old. But I never really had given my life to God to God be the Lord of my life.
Right.
Yeah. I had never done that. And I knew that I had not done that, and so I got to church, and I had that conviction that came on me. They had an altar call, and I went up, and I really just gave my life completely over to the Lord that night. And I was just so happy and so carefree and just full of joy. I just had that brand new, saved, baby Christian, excitement,
You're on fire now.
Oh yeah. And it was a little bit later.
Yeah, but you're also that night, 70 pounds.
Yes.
Really ill health.
Yes.
And where did the healing process go from that night?
It probably took at least about 3 or 4 weeks. I was going to church all the time, twice a week, actually 2 times on Sunday, and then in the midweek service, so I was all in. But I still knew I was fighting that little battle. And something that I didn't mention earlier, but it's really important, is that when I would go and talk to my guidance counselor, I used to have this picture of this model in my purse, and it was just a little tiny square. And I loved this picture. She looked so thin and so perfect, and I loved this picture, and I kept it in my wallet. And he knew that I had that picture in my wallet. It was kind of a little obsessive thing that I did.
Sure.
And so when I finally knew, hey, I really need God to help me with this, we were in a church service, and my sister and I were standing there, and the pastor came down, and he said, we're going to have an altar call, and he said, and we're going to pray for people to be healed. He said, but there are some people here that you need to be delivered from something. There is something that's plaguing you, and you need to be delivered. And I knew that God was speaking right then to me. It was me. I needed to be delivered. I needed to be set free from this thing, because when I tried to get better, I couldn't. When I would try to not look at calories and not, eat this way or eat that way, or
you found yourself coming back.
I would go right back to it. I couldn't.
Those habits.
Yes, because when I would sit down to eat, even if I would try to not think about the calories, in my head I was going 75 calories for each piece of bread, and I knew what every calorie was for everything, and I couldn't get it out of my head. So I knew I need deliverance. So I went down and I got prayed for. They laid hands on me, and they prayed for me. And when they prayed for me, I was delivered. I'm so sorry. It's just something that I've never forgotten. But I felt something just come up off of me. I really physically felt it. And nobody could ever tell me any different, because that was my experience. And my sister and it was a great service. And we went home, and we were in the kitchen of our house, and we were standing there talking about how good the service was, and I was opening the refrigerator, and I was making a sandwich, and I was totally oblivious to it. Making a sandwich, I was so hungry, making chips, and I got the chips out and got the pop out and whatever else I was.
What you're saying is it looked like a regular meal.
It looked like a regular meal, and I sat there and I ate it, and we were talking, and I got through the first whole half of the sandwich, and my sister said, Becky, do you realize you've actually eating a sandwich?
Half a sandwich?
Eating a half a sandwich. And I said, no. And she said, or later, she said that she was afraid to bring attention to it because she didn't want to break the spell, She didn't want to, make me all of a sudden think about it. But she just was like, Becky, you're eating. And I just started crying, and we were both just, so happy, and just, really just giving God praise right there in my kitchen.
And now, talking about your deliverance, you were starting to talk about that picture, and, I heard your story.
Yes.
So you've got to finish the picture story.
I'm going right there. This picture was very pivotal, and I never knew it, and how amazing it is that God will use the stupidest, simplest little things to prove and show that he is God. And so I got prayed for, that all happened. I go back to school, and of course, you know me, I'm in school, I'm a baby Christian, and I'm now delivered from anorexia, so I'm telling everybody about it. You know, people are ducking and running from me, you know, because here I am. They know I'm hunting them down to talk to them about God. And so I get to my counselor, and I go and I come in the office. I still remember I walked in the office, and I hit his desk with my hand, and I said, I'm set free. And he said, oh, I don't know what you mean. And I said, I don't have anorexia anymore. And he was like, Becky, you know, because he thought, oh, for sure.
Right. He's been
Just
working
because I say it.
He's been working with you for over a year at this point.
Right.
Yeah. So how could you just be delivered?
Right. And he's like, sit down, let's talk. So I sit down and we start talking, and I start telling him Jesus set me free, and I got prayed for at church, and I felt God just touch me, and I know that I am set free from this. I know that I am. I haven't thought about a calorie in a week. You know, it had been at least a week since I get a chance to see him. And I said, I've been eating my lunches. I've been eating everything. I said, you can come down and eat lunch with me, you know. And so we talked for a few minutes, and he said, well, I'll tell you what. He said, I will believe that you are set free if you can take that picture out of your wallet and rip it up and throw it away.
Oh.
Now, exactly. That's what inside myself, I was like, oh, you know.
That was still your one little hitch.
Sorry, that was a
You hadn't really
challenge.
thought about your picture.
Exactly right. I had totally forgotten about it. It was in my purse, and I had not yet taken it out and done anything with it. And part of me was like, oh, I don't want to throw that away. But the other part of me thought, if I don't do this, he will never know that there is a God, and that God delivers people,
That's right.
that God loves people, and God cares about people. I have to do this for God, not just for me. See, I didn't know that was one little last thread that was hanging on to me. And I reached in my wallet, and I said, okay. I pulled my wallet out, but inside my heart is pounding because it was a big ordeal for me. I mean, I kind of worshiped that picture, really. And I pulled it out, and I ripped it. And I remember that when I did that first rip, the last little bit that was holding on to me just came off. And I felt that complete freedom, and I just knew, God, you completely set me free. And I ripped it up the rest of the way, and his mouth was on the floor. He just could not believe that I did that. And even to this day, he still says to me that made such a big impact in his life when I did that.
So at age 4, the Lord Jesus Christ became your Savior.
Yeah.
That night at church, he became your Redeemer.
Yes.
And that day, he also became your Deliverer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's right.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
And
Well-
it's incredible.
Well, Becky, we certainly appreciate you sharing your story, and it's so powerful. You know, what is something that you would want to say to someone who is struggling with that disorder right now?
Well, you know, everybody's different. My story is that God stepped in, and I had an instantaneous deliverance. That was instantaneous.
It's not everybody's story.
That's not everybody's story. I have friends that have struggled with other things and addictions in their life, and theirs was more of a gradual thing, or even healings that has been a gradual thing. And, you know, I know that God has placed doctors on this earth. You know, Luke was a doctor, right? And so I know that God works through doctors as well. And so I'm not saying that don't go to a psychologist, don't go to a psychiatrist. I'm not saying that at all, but what I am saying is that you need to get help. And I would encourage anyone out there that's listening that if you're struggling with an eating disorder, whether it's anorexia or whether it's bulimia or whether it's just an eating disorder that you have, whether it's that you can't stop eating, you know, because that's an eating disorder too, that the first step in any of those type of situations is always to be able to admit it to yourself, and then to be able to admit it to someone else, and then to be able to ask someone else for help. One of the things that I definitely strongly believe in is the power of prayer. And I do believe that you can be prayed over, and that you can say, God, you have to take this from me. You know, you have to help me because I am addicted to this, or I'm dealing with this, or I'm struggling with this eating disorder, and I don't want it to kill me. When I was going through my eating disorder, Karen Carpenter died of anorexia nervosa in the 80s. And so it's definitely something that can kill you either way. I mean, you go either way, whether you can't stop eating or whether you struggle with an eating disorder. You can kill yourself by taking the over-the-counter things that are out there like I did, just by putting things in you that shouldn't be in there, or by doing things that you really shouldn't be doing. I had a really good friend, and I want to bring this up really quickly, who lived in a very wealthy family in Perrysburg. And her and I connected because we both had anorexia. And she was, I think, a year older than me in school. And her parents had sent her to the best psychiatrist in the country. They paid for the best psychiatrist in the country. And the reason they did that was because she not only had anorexia, she struggled with bulimia, and she would purge. And she would use the family bathtub to throw up in, and it actually, the stomach acid ate the porcelain of the bathtub. And they said, this problem is, beyond us, and we don't know what to do. Well, I got delivered in the process of her and I being friends. And she called me up. I still, even to this day, just can remember I was answering the phone on the stairs. We had a phone on the stairs because we couldn't have the family phone. There was 5 girls trying to talk to all their friends. So we had to have our own phone. So I answered the phone on the stairs, and it was her, and we talked for a little while. And I shared with her my testimony. And she said, Becky, with me, it's like it's suppressed. She said, but with you, it's gone. And she recognized that was no longer there in me. And that was, to me, the greatest compliment that God could receive for the deliverance that he did in my life. That somebody that had been struggling with the same things that I had gone to this psychiatrist, and the best psychiatrist in the country, supposedly. And she was able to look at me and say, it's gone.
Yep, you were set free, you were delivered. You went to the best deliverer.
Yeah, absolutely.
The best person to set you free.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and before we go, what resources would you recommend to someone out there?
Well, I think that I would always encourage someone to go talk to their pastors or somebody that they really respect at church. Some churches have licensed psychologists, on staff, or licensed counselors, and I think that's always a good way to go as well. And also a doctor. I think that doctors are of utmost importance, because this is not just a psychological and a emotional illness, but it also affects, obviously, physically the body. And so first and foremost, go to the doctor. Go to your doctor and find out, your current state. Make sure that you haven't gotten yourself to the place where you put yourself in danger. And then from that point, you can move on through those steps. But, I definitely believe in the power of prayer.
Thank you for sharing your testimony.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yes, thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for the great work that you're doing over there at Proclaim FM. And we so appreciate you being, such a leader in our community.
Thank you. I so appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for joining us on Main Street. Be sure to join us next week for another inspiring episode.
We hope that Main Street has been a blessing to you today. Please feel free to contact the following to learn more about the topics discussed on today's show. WLMB would like to thank all the faithful supporters of WLMB that make this program possible. Main Street is a production of WLMB-TV 40 in Toledo. All rights reserved.